Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. Because whenever a new archetype comes out, I just absolutely have to talk about it. Today we're taking a look at Abhyss from Deck Build Pack Ancient Guardians, also known as D-Bag. I wish I was joking about that, but for some reason Konami actually decided that for some reason it would just be hilarious if they decided to name their set D-Bag. So here we are. So, let's start with the first monster here. Null, Dreg of the Abyss. It's a light reptile with 0 attack, 0 defense, level 4. It only uses its first and second effects, once per turn. That's pretty standard, but here's where this deck gets weird. Send this card from your hand to the graveyard. Send a dark reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. You control no monsters. You control an Abhyss monster. You can special this card from your graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. You can't special monsters for the rest of the turn after this was summoned to, while it's in a monster zone. Wait, what? You cannot special summon monsters while this card, special summoned by this effect, is in the monster zone except reptile monsters. I guess I didn't realize what that did my first read through. You'll have to forgive me, it's 2 in the morning right now. That's interesting, actually. So let's say you ditched a dark reptile, normal summoned a level 4 Abhyss, and then specialed Null from graveyard. You could make King of the Feral Imps, search for another Abhyss, and then you wouldn't be restricted to reptiles anymore. That's a really interesting restriction. I really like that, actually. This card's pretty fucking cool. Yeah, alright, 10 out of 10 on this guy. He's a lot, cooler than I thought he was. Moving on. Nihil, Dreg of the Abyss. Same deal as last time, 0-2000. First and seconds can only be used once per turn. It's a dark reptile, so you can send it off of Null. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. Send 1 light reptile from your deck to the graveyard. Just the reverse of what Null says. If this card's normal or specialed, you can add 1 Abhyss spell or trap from your deck to your hand. Once again, this is just a generally good card. I would say 10 out of 10 on this. It doesn't float or anything, but it is just a foolish for your archetype. So send Null. This is pretty basic for setting up what this archetype wants to do. We've got Floggy, Haze of the Abyss. I don't care if I mispronounced that wrong. In TF2, it's called the Phlogistinator. I'm going to call him Floggy because I just like it. It's a light reptile, level 4, 1800, 1400. Hard once per turn on first and second effects. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard or special summoned from the graveyard, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls and 1 monster in their graveyard with an equal or higher attack. Special that target in the opponent's graveyard to their field, and if you do, send the target they control to the graveyard. If this card is in your graveyard, you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, add it to your hand. First effect, Poo-Poo Doo-Doo. Very, very mid, first effect. It does not really do anything. It does bait negates, I suppose. You can use it to, bait a Borreload Savage Dragon or something, but chances are if your opponent has some kind of big negator on field with, high attack, the thing in their graveyard that also has high attack or equal attack is probably going to be just as strong as their thing with that, attack points at that very moment. Trading a Savage Dragon for, a Borreload Dragon is not that big of an issue. With the second effect, that's pretty good. The second effect lets you just instantly get it back to your hand for the normal summon. And by giving them that allows them to just get some generic rank 4 spam for King of the Feral Imps, or use it to set up their boss monsters, which we'll go into later. So, Floggy, I say run it at like 2, maybe like 3 if you really want to, but I would say 2. Nihil and Null are definitely 3 ofs each, because these set up your plays, and like Null's an extender, Nihil's a starter. Like these 2 things are absolutely nuts. Zoha, Haze of the Abyss. This card is sent from the field to the graveyard, or specialed from the graveyard. You can have your opponent draw 1 card, and if they do, add 1 Abyss monster from your deck to your hand, except Zoha. Then each player sends 1 card from their hand to the graveyard. And then it has the same secondary effect as Floggy. So, take a look at these 2, right? Null, discard it, send Haze, Zoha or whatever. Zoha will summon itself, or it'll add itself back to your hand, and then you normal Zoha, special Null, make King of the Pharaoh Limps. And then you can just search one of the big monsters, which we'll get into later. Also, this effect right here, its first effect, is actually not that bad. It's like a Mothman effect, but you actually get to choose what you add to your hand. So it sets up your graveyard, lets you search an Abyss monster you want, and its downside is that it lets your opponent like draw a card and discard. But it's not the end of the world. Your chances are your opponent probably won't ash it, because that means that they're going -1 in a situation where no one would be going plus. So unless they really don't want you to get that search off, chances are they're probably not going to negate that. So that is an actual like search that you can get off, that they don't necessarily like have motivation to negate, because they would much rather spend their negates on something like bigger and better. Our first level 8 is Curse, Dawn of the Abyss. This card's in your graveyard. You contribute 1 monster, special summon this card. Then your opponent can special summon 1 monster from their graveyard to their field, but its effects are negated. If this card is special summoned, you target 1 level 4 or lower Abyss in your graveyard, special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. I know a lot of people don't like this card, and I cannot blame them for it, but I personally like this thing. Here's my reasoning. There are lots of ways for you to get rid of your opponent's cards in the graveyard. DD Crow, like you could pop it or something once it's summoned, stuff like that. And assuming you're going first or something and your opponent can't summon anything out of their graveyard, this essentially has no drawback. But because you can also just special this off of other things' effects, and you don't have to summon it off an Abyss effect to get that second one, this just sets up your extra materials for you. So you could back to the front this, summon another Abyss from your graveyard, then you have 2 tributes for the other Abyss monsters, which, spoiler alert, there's other level 8s that require 2 tributes. But Curse, I would run it like 2 to 3-ish. Like Zoha, I'd run it like, honestly, if I'm being real here, realistically, I can see like all 4 of these guys being ran at 3, and then each of the big guys ran at 2, and then their biggest guy ran at 1. But that's just how I'm seeing the deck play out. Aleph, though, I do not recommend running at all. So Aleph, Dusk of the Abyss, 2,800. Its cards in your graveyard, tribute a monster, special this card, then your opponent adds a monster from their graveyard to their hand. This is actually better than them summoning something, and I'll explain that in a second. If this card is special, target 2 of your banished monsters, including at least 1 reptile, return them to the graveyard. So, my issue with this puts something in your opponent's hand, and there's not a lot of ways that you're going to be banishing your reptiles in this deck. Now, everything in here is light and dark, so chaos versions will 100% exist and probably be some of the better variants of the deck. But 2 banished monsters, including a reptile. In Archetype, I think there's about like one card that actually banishes things. And it's Null. Unless there's another one that I just forgot about. Null is the only thing that I remember offhand that actually banishes. And for that, you're giving your opponent a card back to their hand. That's important because putting a card in their hand means that they can just add back a hand trap. So that Gamma that they used to make Omega earlier, they can just get that back and then make another level 8 synchro. That Ash that they used first turn, they can get that back. That Droll, they can get that again. That Veiler they just discarded, they can get that back again. This card just is not worth playing. Your motivation for playing it is to get your recovery back. And there's nothing for you to recover really from the banished zone that you would immediately want back. So for that, I don't recommend playing Aleph whatsoever. What I do recommend playing is these two. Aaron, King of the Abyss. This card's in your graveyard to contribute 2 monsters. Special this card. If your opponent adds a card from their deck to the hand, except during the draw phase, select a random card from their hand and send it to the graveyard. If a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add 1 light or dark reptile from your deck or graveyard to your hand, except Aaron, King of the Abyss. So he has one of the Dark Law effects, which that's good. I guess it's not necessarily Dark Law. It's more. It's closer to Har. So he has Har's like primary. I guess not primary, but secondary ability. So he has Har's Sin from Hand effect, and on top of that, if you find a way to deal with your opponent's cards by card effect, you get the advantage off of that because you get to search off of their destruction, which is really, really helpful. Yeah, I recommend playing this dude at 2 because you don't necessarily want to draw it. You want to like have it set up by something like Snake Rain or Null. But okay, and we're back to it. For some reason, my microphone just decided to unplug itself, which is always fun. But we're back now, so yay. This is Amnesia, Queen of the Abyss. Dark Reptile, 2721, level 8. If this card is in your graveyard, you contribute 2 monsters, special summon this card. If a monster is special summoned from your opponent's graveyard, you can send 1 card they control to the graveyard. And if a monster is sent from your opponent's hand or deck to the graveyard, you can special 1 light or dark reptile from your graveyard, except for Amnesia. She is really good. Like, this is a better boss monster for their deck than the actual boss monster. Like, she's kind of nuts. So she completely shuts down something getting specialed from graveyard, which lots of decks special from graveyard right now. Like, look at Eldritch, for example. Your opponent sanguines back an Eldritch from graveyard or something. Just shut that down. Your opponent Chakanines something back from grave. Shut that down. A Drytron summons itself from grave. Shut that down. Like, what's its name? The virtual world that, like, the level 6 tuner virtual world. Shut that thing down the moment it summons something from grave. Like, this thing is really, really good for shutting that down. And then on top of that, if your opponent, like, dumps something, you can special a light or dark reptile from graveyard. Obviously, she's meant to, like, work with Aaron, but she works so good just by herself. Like, the fact that this card can just deal so easily with something like Virtual World is kind of incredible. Because your opponent, like, summons something back off of a Virtual World. send it to the graveyard. Your opponent dumps something from deck off of virtual world. Summon your own an extra reptile from your graveyard. Like it's just so free. This card is so incredibly free. Like these two combo together so well, and on top of that, they're both really good. Like these two cards like really do just make the deck more than the actual boss monster here does. So this is Abhyss, Deity of the Abyss. Level 10, 31, 22. Its cards in your graveyard, tribute 3, special it. Really wish this was a quick effect. Once while face up on the field, send all monsters on the field to the graveyard, except those that were specialed from the graveyard. Now, I know a lot of people look at this and immediately say, what? Once? No! But here's the thing. You literally just need to use this thing in the same context as, like, as a link material, basically. This is a link material that if it's summoned back also gives you a board wipe. Like, there's so many, like, just cards that can easily get this back from the graveyard for a free wipe. Like, it's just easy. Like, play it like people played Thunderclap Skywolf. Like, just do that. That actually just makes this so much better. What's not good is Depths of the Abyss. So, if a face-up reptile you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you target one card your opponent controls, send it to the graveyard. Not that great. It basically does nothing, actually. Like, your opponent would have to actively play into it, and while it can trigger Aaron over here, your opponent's just going to deal with Aaron before they deal with, like, another card you control, or they'll just get rid of this, because the punishment for getting rid of this is if this card's in your field zone and it's destroyed by opponent's card effect, you can send cards in the top of your opponent's deck to the graveyard equal to the number of reptiles with different names in your graveyard. Let's ignore the fact that Unicorn exists and it should just be like targeted, but sure. I'll let my opponent set up their graveyard for free if they take care of my card. So who actually like is going to run this? Probably at least like some people, because it's like a searchable one-up that you can just run as punishment for your opponent trying to deal with your board. I really like this card, Emptiness of the Abyss. I see people trash talking this, and I get why, but this card's so cool. Like, during the main phase, you contribute a reptile, then target a monster in your opponent's graveyard, special it to your field, but then send it to the graveyard during the end phase. And if this card is sent, if this card's in the spell and trap zone is sent to the graveyard, send all face-up non-reptiles you control to the graveyard. This card is just so cool. Like actually, genuinely, this card's really, really cool. Like, you're telling me I can just tribute a reptile and then take anything from my opponent's graveyard. It doesn't have its effectiveness like negated or anything. It's just free. Like, wow. Like, actually, like, that's actually just so cool. I'm not gonna get over that. Like, that's so incredibly cool. Like, oh my god, you can take your opponent's Eldritch with this. Imagine your opponent is trying to trigger Eldritch in graveyard, and you tribute like your like Null or something, and it's just yours now. It's your Eldritch now. Imagine doing this on your turn and taking your opponent's like, you know, Eldritch or something. You overlay it with your Abhyss for a rank 10. That's so funny. That's actually so funny. Like, this card is genuinely good because this is graveyard disruption. This is graveyard disruption that you get to take, so your opponent's gonna have to put in extra effort to like get that off of your side of the field. Yeah, take your opponent's Nyan Nyan, take your opponent's Eldritch, take your opponent's Drytrons. Like, it's the same reason why Amnesia is good, because this card just screws with your opponent's graveyard. And so many decks in this like game right now are so reliant on the graveyard. Like, the fact people are actually playing Skullmeister this format, fucking Skullmeister, really shows like how important the graveyard is. And this card is so good at messing with the graveyard. Like, I say genuinely run this at 3. It's so strong. And what helps facilitate this card is this next one, Invasion of the Abyss. In special 2 Abyss tokens, which aren't really anything special, but if you have 8 or more Abyss monsters with different names in your graveyard, apply this effect instead. Special 2 reptiles with different names from your graveyard. So that is a hard effect to get off, but the reward is just getting free advantage, like just 2 free special summons. Now, I will say, this is probably meant for you to revive Amnesia and Aeron with, which you should probably be doing, unless you're summoning, like, Ogda Abyss or something, and, like, you shouldn't be summoning the other guys, but, if you can get that effect off, especially because Snake Rain's a card, which is getting reprinted in here, by the way, like, this setup cost is actually not the most impossible thing in the world. Like, I'm so down for this card. Like, this is such a cool card. Like, the best way I can describe this deck is cool. Like, it's just so cool. Like, look at this artwork. Like, that field spell's so cool. This archetype's so cool. Oh my god, it's so cool. Like, I'm gonna make, like, a tutorial on how to play this deck or something. Like, it's so cool. It's so cool. I can't stop freaking out about it. It's so cool. Everything about this archetype is so cool. And I know that I was like dying talking about it in the other cut of this because, like, before my microphone died. Like, because, like, this dude is just mid as hell. But, like, everything here is so cool. Everything flows so nicely. And, like, a lot of people are gonna say, like, oh, this archetype, like, doesn't really do anything. Like, it needs, like, more ways to help you offset the balance of these guys. Which, like, yeah, it does. That doesn't stop it from being some of the coolest shit I've ever read. These cards are so cool. I'm not gonna stop freaking out about it because they're so awesome. That's my nerding out for the night. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you enjoyed me freaking out about cardboard, leave a comment below on why you think I'm an idiot for liking this archetype so much. But that'll be it for me tonight. I hope y'all are gonna have a good time. Have a swell day.